This is a pinhole camera. This is what we use in school to investigate how light travels in straight lines. It's very simple. It's a box, empty box, with two holes cut in it. There's a circular hole at one end and a rectangular one at the other end. And the rectangular one is covered with a bit of translucent paper, a bit like baking paper. And the other one, normally what happens is we would in class cut a bit of black card out and put a tiny pinhole in the middle of it. And we would use that to make what we call a pinhole camera or a pinhole viewer. Now, you can't do that at home because we don't have these. However, we're going to try and build our own pinhole camera today. And I'm going to look at a few different ways that we can try that. And it'd be great if you could build one and see how you get on. So here are a few things I found lying around at home in the recycling bin or in the kitchen that might be of some use to us. Let's see if we can use any of these things to make a pinhole camera. Depending on what type of pinhole camera you're going to make, you're going to need a few tools. You probably need a pair of scissors, a drawing pin or a pin to make a pinhole, and possibly a little craft knife would be a useful thing. In one case I might even use a small saw. It's important to remember that if you're doing any of this and using a knife or a saw, you have to do this under adult supervision, please. You'll also need a pen or a pencil for marking some things. Sellotape would be useful, and I've also got some black electrical tape as well, because some of this is going to involve blocking light from coming in to the pinhole camera. So our first attempt, I'm just going to use a box, let's get some Pop-Tarts, and the idea is that we're going to cut a hole for our viewer there, and on the other side we're going to put a pinhole. Now the pinhole needs to be very small, and we'll have a look at how we can do that in a minute. First of all, I'm going to cut out a place for our viewer on this side. Okay, and on the other side we need a place for a pinhole. Now, we could make a pinhole directly with just pushing a drawing pin through it, and we want that to be in the middle of the opposite side, but I want the pinhole to be as small as possible. So to do that, I'm going to use some tin foil to allow us to make a very small hole. First I need to cut out a slightly bigger hole here. Now I'm going to cover this hole with a bit of tin foil and put the pinhole through that. So I've covered the tin foil with sellotape just to reinforce it, and you can see it on the other side. I just want to put a small pinhole, as small as I can make it, just through that. So I'm going to use a little pin to do that. I'm just going to put it right in the middle of the hole. And hopefully you should be able to see the light shining through the hole. Doesn't matter that it's not right in the center, that's not going to cause a problem. Now we need to make some sort of screen to cover here, and what we have in school is a sort of translucent paper. Let's see what we can find at home that's going to do something similar. Okay, this time I'm going to use a milk carton, and I'm going to cut a rectangle out of the side. I'm going to stick that over the top and see if that can be our translucent screen. Again, watch your fingers. We're going to stick that on over there. Yep. And there's our pinhole camera, and we'll see how that works a bit later. Okay, I'm going to try exactly the same thing with a carton of juice. I'm going to cut a hole in it, I'm going to put a pinhole in it, and I'm going to put a screen on it. And watch your fingers. Make sure you clean this before you do it. It's got a bit of water in it. I'm going to dry it out. That's a little drier inside, and as you can see inside the juice carton, it's sort of covered with a metallic foil. So instead of using the tin foil to make a hole, I'm just going to stick a hole straight through this time with my pin. And hopefully that should do the job. For the screen this time, I'm going to use some baking paper. This is maybe a little browner than I would like, but we'll see how it works. So I'm just going to cut a rectangle out, big enough to cover this, and we'll stick that on. And you can see that it is translucent, so let's put that on. I'm going to use some masking tape this time, see if I can block a little bit more light coming in. It's not really necessary, but I'll tape these sides down too. Okay, and we'll see how that works later. This time I'm going to use a tin can, and I've punched a hole at the bottom of the tin can with a nail and a bit of wood, and I'll give you a clip of how I did that here now. So I'm going to use a nail, I'm going to use a bit of wood and a hammer. If you're washing your tin cans, please be careful and don't cut yourself like I did. Only do this under supervision of an adult, please. So, I'm going to mark the centre of the can where I want the holes to be. And to make a hole, I'm going to support the can on a bit of wood. And I want to make sure that that bit of wood is underneath the X. Got my nail. I'm going to carefully tap through. We've got a very small hole. Okay. For the screen, I'm going to use sandwich bag, so translucent. I'm going to cover the end with that. I'll have to do a bit of cutting to make sure it's fairly smooth. And that's too big for a pinhole, so again I'm going to cover that with some tin foil and use a pin just to put a hole through the middle of that. So I'll do that first. I'm going to cover all of it with sellotape just to stop the tin foil from tearing. And if you are doing this, please be careful because the inside edges can be quite sharp. I did cut my finger last week. And I'm going to use a pin to pierce a hole through the centre of our other hole there. So now we're going to use some sandwich bag to cover across. So I'm going to cut out enough to cover. I'm going to tape that down around the sides. Okay, there we go, and we'll try that one out again later, see which one's the best. Okay, the last one we're going to make is maybe the most complex, and it's going to use a tin of Pringles to use your pinhole camera, and we're going to use all the parts of this. We're going to use the lid as our screen. We're going to put the pinhole in the metal base at the bottom, and we're going to cut the tube to have a short pinhole camera. You don't want one that's too long. And the rest of the tube we're going to use as a screen to allow us to use it in brighter conditions. There are instructions for this on pages 8 and 9 in your light notes, including a diagram showing us how to assemble it, a list of what you need, and full instructions. This is a bit more complex. We might have to use a saw to cut through this, or a larger knife, so you must take care when you're doing this. Firstly, we need to draw a line about 6 centimeters around the bottom of the tin, away from the metal base. I've measured up 6 centimeters and put a few marks around. I'm going to just join that up. So now I've got a line the whole way around there, 6 centimeters from the metal base, and we're going to use a saw to cut through that as neatly as possible. So here I've got a small saw. I'll just try to cut my way through. And I'm maybe going to try and neat those edges up a little bit. Use a little craft knife for that. Now we need to make a pinhole through that. I'm going to use a drawing pin to do that. Again, take care. And our pinholes through the middle. Our screen is simply going to go over there. And so there we have a simple pinhole camera. But to make it easier to use in dark conditions, in bright conditions, we're going to attach the rest of the tube on like this, so we can view down it. So firstly, I need to tape this on. I'm going to use some black tape to stop the light leaking in. Now we're going to tape the rest of the tube on. And now it's complete. So here are 4 pinhole cameras. I have a cardboard box. I have the juice carton. Got a tin can, and we've got the Pringles tube, and we're going to go and see which one of those is going to allow us to get the best image. For this to work best, ideally you would be in a darkened room looking at a single very bright object. In this case we're going to look at a light bulb. I'm using this one because it's got a bit, we can see the details of the filaments. If I turn this on, hopefully you should be able to see that the filament is made of a number of straight lines. So we're going to set this up with the pinhole cameras to see what they see. Firstly, we have our cardboard box one, and I'm going to point it with the pinhole pointing towards the light and the screen towards our camera. And there you should be able to see quite a good image of the filament of the bulb. You can see that as I move to the left and to the right and up and down, the image moves across the screen. And I don't know if you can notice, but maybe you can see now that this end, the filaments are narrowed together and they spread out at the top. So they're wider at the top, narrower at the bottom. Whereas here, they're wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Our image is upside down. It is inverted. Let's try with another pinhole camera. Yeah, now we're going to try with our juice carton. And a bit harder to see, but it's definitely there. It's quite faint, but you should be able to see the image of the filaments. There it is there. Not quite as clear as the last one, but it does work quite well. Thirdly, here's our tin can. And there we go, we can see our image quite clearly there, more clearly than the last one. Again, you can clearly see that the filaments are wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Again, it's upside down compared to real life. Upside down and back to front. Finally, we've got our can of Pringles. And the advantage of the can of Pringles is we can close it right up. And maybe it's not quite as sharp in this case. But hopefully you can clearly see the image being formed on the screen. You can also see, if I move it over this way, you can see the image being projected onto the side of the can. Or on that side as well. Finally, the pinhole camera made by the Pringles can has one significant advantage. It can be used in daylight. Here I'm looking at the window, which is a lot brighter than its surroundings. And hopefully you should be able to see the image of the window appearing on the screen. And you can certainly see it being projected onto the walls of the can. And if you look carefully, you can even see colour. You can see the blue in the sky, the white of the houses. But notice the sky is at the bottom of the picture, whereas the houses are at the top, showing clearly that the image is inverted, upside down and back to front. The pinhole of the pinhole camera acts like a lens, just like the lens in the camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the lens off this camera and replace it with a pinhole, a bit of cardboard. And I'm going to take a picture and we'll see what can be produced from that. So these are a few pictures I took around the garden. You can see that they're not as sharp as a normal lens by any stretch of the imagination, but they do form an image quite clearly on the screen. They show colour, they show shape and detail. It would be great to see what sort of pinhole cameras you can produce. If you do produce one, take a picture of it and upload it to Google Classroom on the stream, and we can have a look to see what everyone's done.